Hi, we're ready for element number 29. Notice again that we've skipped 4 to 5 in week 1, and then the first element for this week was element 24, and now we're on element 29. If you're interested in it, is what do I typically do to demonstrate intensity and enthusiasm? The teacher does demonstrate intensity and enthusiasm for the content in a variety of ways when you're looking at teacher evidence of this one. And what's interesting about it is that not this particular element, but actually this examination of specific teacher traits, even as an experienced teacher, I am finding that as I come to you to tell you about these particular traits, I'm realizing what my weaknesses are. So this, even though I do a lot of the easy peasy intensity and enthusiasm tricks, I don't do some of the fancier ones that I'll talk about at the end, which if you were watching element 24, you might understand why I haven't always had the time to do some of the specific items that I'll talk about, but I think they're great, and I think I'm going to try to incorporate them more in class, just like all of you can into your lesson plans this semester and in your future. So in this particular topic, we talk about teacher evidence, where the teacher describes personal experience that relates to the content. So in particular, I told a personal story in number 24 that was about my family and the realities of having 20 things going on around you all at once, and how that could be similar to a classroom. So you have that option, where you could make sort of an indirect connection, or as you gain more experience as a teacher, you could talk about times when you actually used this particular trait, such as intensity and enthusiasm in your class, to have an impact. So one example I can give you of that, where I use personal experience, is that I used to teach the book Freedom Writer's Diary to my students when I taught at a school for children who were adjudicated there through probation or through the welfare system, pretty much. So when I taught there, I taught Freedom Writer's Diary, and that was impactful on those students just by the sheer fact that it was something they could very much so relate to. But I had the opportunity to take a group of students from that school to Ball State, ironically, and to visit the author of that book. Not all of the students that wrote Freedom Writer's Diary in her classroom, but Erin Grewell herself came to be a guest speaker, and I was able to take students there. And the funniest part of it all is that when a group of the girls and I kind of went into the bathroom, because you know how girls do, we go to the bathroom together, right? We all went together, and who do you think actually walked out of one of those stalls when we were in there? And my girls and I just about fell all over ourselves, trying not to attack Erin Grewell, but also knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet her. So one of the bravest girls, who is still one of the bravest girls from that class that I had, she went up to her and said, hey, we read your book in class, and I just wanted to tell you how impressed I am by you. And she gave her a hug, and she was the nicest lady I think we'd ever met. She hugged all of the kids, and then she signed 13 copies of the book that we'd brought to the speaking engagement and gave everybody hugs publicly. So her ability to bring intensity and enthusiasm to her classroom is what drew her kids in to her learning style and her perspective and engaged them. And so my ability to use a story like that as the other students were able to use that story to increase their own personal intensity and enthusiasm as they communicated to other kids the excitement of reading and the excitement of being able to do your own writing, because we wrote our own book too based on the Freedom Writer's Diary. Just that intensity and enthusiasm that comes from those personal stories is evidence not only in the teacher evidence, where the teacher describes that personal experience, but in the student evidence column, when asked, it says that students say that the teacher likes the content and likes teaching. I'll tell you that kids that I had during that time period still say, man, she just, that was her thing. She loved teaching that. We could just tell every time she came into class, and by how giddy I was when I met Erin Grewell. So those elements of the teacher evidence, where the teacher is telling a personal story, that I think that really has an impact more than anything on students, because they really want to feel like they know you and feel like there is something about you that is meaningful beyond the walls of the school, but again, within appropriate boundaries. So, if I'm going to demonstrate intensity and enthusiasm as a teacher, I might signal for excitement using physical gestures, which the way I'm actually talking to you on camera, I have my hands down, only because I tend to use physical gestures all the time when I speak. And I think it would be distracting in the video for my hands to be shown. So, my physical gestures, though, are definitely an intentional way to increase the intensity and enthusiasm of a presentation. Also, voice tone of voice. I don't do it as frequently with in higher education, but it was something that I used all the time. If I had to change my tone of voice to tell the class something that was going to happen next, they knew, just like my kids knew, that I could change it to another tone and I could completely be ready to tell you exactly what you need to do. So, don't think that I'm Sybil. Just think that after you've been teaching for 15 years, you will definitely have the ability to shift tones of voice instantly and use those tones of voice to signify to students, what degree of intensity you're trying to get across to them, whether it's happy intensity or whether it's don't you dare touch that intensity. There's also dramatization of information that you can use, which, again, if you're a natural storyteller, that's pretty easy to say, okay, so then there were 300 of these elephants that came at me when I was at the zoo, and I didn't know what to do. So I was walking down the path, and then all of a sudden I see them all coming at me. And then I realized that was a big, giant fence, and maybe 300 was a bit of an exaggeration, but it felt like 300 because one elephant is the size of 300 cats, and that's all I'd ever seen before that day. So, personal experience, dramatization of information, changing my tone of voice, and again, I kept my hands down so I wouldn't distract you entirely when I told that story. Then I think the most important piece of teacher evidence for this one is that the teacher is overtly adjusting their energy level, his or her energy level. And remember, the difference between overt and covert is more subtle and it's kind of, hidden, your intent is, but overt is you have to be aware of it. It can't just be you suddenly getting excited about something and using more expression in your voice. You have to even think ahead and think, okay, I need to lower my voice to make sure they know exactly what's going to come next because it's going to be exciting. Or if I need to raise my voice to completely wake up the kid in the back row, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to use my cheap tricks in order to make that happen. So student evidence of those items working, again, according to your reproducibles that are on that link on the Padlet, are that student attention levels increase when the teacher demonstrates enthusiasm and intensity for the content. It's evident. I even see it in higher ed, and you've probably felt yourself become more interested in what was going on, even not meaning to be that interested. Some of the ideas that they offer to you within the book that are specific methods for increasing your intensity and enthusiasm. And again, pardon me for looking at the book to do it, but it's the best way I can do. There are some things where you could use visuals, you could use graphs, you could use infographics, you could use quick video clips that come from online, you could use audio clips where they don't really know what is coming next, or audio clips of some important speech. I always think of hearing Martin Luther King Jr. speaking, and that always captures my attention, and I always am immediately taken back to that time in my studies and what I learned about it. So just audio clips like that are a great way to get people's attention and sort of sober up the mood really fast if you need to get to a very serious topic right when kids come in the room. But then there are other funny ways that you can do things. You could use a funny headline from the paper, which is a lot harder to find these days. You could use a silly quote. You can use a cartoon and post the image of the cartoon or comic up on the board. You can also use verbal and nonverbal signals. So I've already mentioned some of those, but I think sometimes you can even give kids a more explicit nonverbal or verbal cue that says, okay, it's time to get down to business, and you can teach that procedurally. And some of those signals need to be signals that provide the appropriate level of intensity for something that's important in the classroom. And I'm thinking specifically of maybe a fire drill or when there's an announcement coming on that you can tell by the tone of the principal's voice it's going to be a very serious one. So you need to have maybe even signals or nonverbals or verbals that signal that type of intensity. So it's not all fun and game intensity, but you do need to make sure that you vary that with children throughout the day and that they understand when the right time is to be funny and the right time is to be serious. And again, you can use your displays of intensity and enthusiasm to do that. I don't think there's a whole lot else I could say, except I would be interested in hearing, when you talk about goal setting in this area, hearing how the teachers that you have around you actually use this trait, as well as how you think you can incorporate this into one of your activities as a practicum student. Thank you.